This episode of What Makes You Tick is brought to you by Wilson's Auctions, Ireland and the UK's largest independent auction company. I'm delighted to have them on board. They auction everything from designer goods, vehicles, machinery, luxury watches, jewellery, and land and property. This year is also very, very special to Wilson's Auctions as they are celebrating 25 years in Dublin and about to launch their new website, which is wilsonsauctions.com. It's a whole world worth exploring. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to What Makes You Tick. And on this episode, I have a guy who's given me an opportunity when I set up my first ever live What Makes You Tick podcast, and somebody who I admired and how you've brought a whole new perspective to a sport, an elitist sport, which has been quite refreshing. David Kearney, welcome. Thanks, to What Makes You Tick. To be here. Dave, we're going to talk about loads of different pieces, golf obviously being a major part of it, but before we do that, like you're the former high performance director for ladies golf in Ireland, you're a PGA professional or former PGA professional. You have worked all over the world and brought golf to people, but where did the love of golf come from? Like, how did you start?
It's a different answer now than it would have been 10 years ago.
Okay.
And I'm old enough now, mature enough, unfortunately. Well, mature in some ways, but old enough definitely to know why I got involved in it. Because I grew up in Claremorris in the west of Ireland, and you know we still do have magnificent parents down there who give us access to Claremorris Golf Club, which was like a mile from the house, and basically dumped us off to play there for the summer. And my brothers were very good players, still are. Some of them are very good players, some better than others. And I played football as well. I played for the minors under 21 for Mayo, and I was pretty decent soccer player and all that kind of stuff. And I was a swimmer, and I was all, Claremorris is an unbelievable place. Like I should work for the Claremorris Tourist Board. It was an incredible place to grow up. It really was, in terms of having access to sports, having access to entertainment, essentially for a big family of six. So 6 kids. So one of these things that you're kind of in the sport, we're playing the sport, we're enjoying the sport. There's this kind of progression thing in golf, which is really evident even nowadays when I teach that. The person that's hitting the ball, they're one step away from being where they think they want to get to, but when they get there, they're another step away from where they think they want to get to, and so on and so forth. So I think that was the kind of driver. And the other thing was connection, and the other thing was sports, and the other thing was probably the thing that I keep going back to was I remember how the David Jones, the Howard Bennett, the coaches I had when I went to provincial or national training at the time. National training not much, provincial training because I wasn't that good. But even as a footballer playing for Claremorris or playing for Mayo, it was kind of the way they made me feel was how I wanted to try, how I thought it should be done, and how I wanted to make other people feel in terms of trying to unlock the key of a sport or something. And I'm sure an awful lot of people in other jobs feel that way as well. But I think that was the driver. Football was out because I couldn't really make a living from it. And then I was kind of good enough probably at golf to become a PGA professional, but I wasn't probably good enough to become a playing professional. I knew that early, which turns out that was probably a good thing because I was able to focus on my coaching a bit more, a bit earlier. And it was that kind of driver to say, well, kind of be heard, have a kind of a substance of knowledge and information that could maybe influence and help somebody to move forward, whether that's a young person that was on the Irish ladies panel when I was the coach there for over 20 years. And they wanted to go from A to B, and I said, maybe I can step in and be the conduit that helps you get from A to B. So it was something along that, without maybe not articulate it as well as I could, but it was that kind of piece, that coach, a vehicle that gets somebody from point A to point B, but in a different way.
You said that those coaches made you feel a certain way when you were learning. Like,
yes, correct.
What was that?
Safe.
Okay.
Okay to make mistakes. You can do it. Come on. Look how bad that is in some occasions, but look how good it could be when you did it right for me. Well done. And that kind of progression thing, and even in life today, when when there's things in front of me that I find very difficult to overcome, I'd sometimes say to myself, what would I say to myself if it was one of my students? Because it seems to be a bigger problem for me than it is maybe. But if a student walked in with some of the stuff I deal with myself, I'd probably be able to sit them down and help them a little bit. So it's that kind of ability as humans that we want to succeed, we want to move forward, we want to progress, I suppose, without being, it's a never-ending cycle of progression in terms of not many people that come to me for golf tuition, for example, at Sigmoid, come to me because they want to remain the same in terms of their skill set.
Yeah.
So it's like I don't go and see some of my people because I want to stay the same in terms of, let's say it's fitness, or let's say in terms of whether it's spirituality, or whether it's, it's this kind of human driver to say, could we progress a little bit? And then a coach is somebody probably who sits in the space of being able to access the points of make that possible. Good example, I just got some really good help with something this morning, early doors. And it was so easy for the two people helping me, but it was so difficult for me.
Really?
I couldn't see it at all.
Blind spot.
Oh, terrible.
And the fact that they showed it to you, was it a eureka kind of going, oh, why didn't I think of it? Or did you kind of go, I like that perspective?
Yeah, it was just help. It was just like, and it was like, not kind of shelving the responsibility of it, but I just don't have the expertise to get through this particular glitch. Could you help me with it? And it was like, that's how I felt.
That's one of the biggest things though in life as well, though, is asking for help.
Big time.
Like it takes, remove the ego and know that you have your strengths, but others have their strengths, and together you can help each other. Did when you decided that you wanted to coach, like, was it disappointing that you weren't going to play, or did you know that your abilities weren't going to bring you to where you wanted to get to, or what way was it? Like, when did you decide to shelve the participation?
I don't think I ever did even I don't even ever think I even for 1 minute. There was 1 year I played pretty okay for me.
Yeah.
But my goal in golf was to get good enough to go and play a pro-am or play with students and pass myself as a professional golfer.
Okay.
I'd be the same age as Padraig Harrington, and he's like, it was like a world of difference in terms of like. And then I went to tour school once, and I played with this guy that I've never heard of before nor since. And to say that he was 28 times better than me was an understatement. Yeah. So you get these things pretty early. But then you realise then at other point, from a path perspective, well, yeah, okay, but you're still learning about the game and you're still understanding the game. So even by putting yourself out there and exposing yourself and failing, you probably understand a little bit more about the game itself. So it's a funny thing to say, but it did help. But to go to these places and kind of fail and figure out that you're not good enough. But there was always something in my head that knew that I was never going to do it. But I wanted to at least get to a professional level where I could, play and play well, but never for 1 minute think that I could make a living from it. Absolutely not. So the PGA is great because it gives us the ability as young people in sport to be able to decide whether it's, business, the business of running a establishment shop, golf director running a club, for example, professional coach, which I am. There's lots of different strands within professional golf that the PGA of Great Britain and Ireland give us the ability to say, look, come on in, get your handicap down to pass yourself off is pretty good. And then after that, you can actually say, you can look at all these different avenues and go down one or more of them, which I've done in the past. I've been a golf director, I've been a club pro, still am, always was a coach. And you're kind of going through these things to see, you're getting experience, you're enjoying it, you're trying, you're testing it out. But for me, it's always come back to coaching all the time.
So, having done a bit of research, psychology has been a huge part of your journey, right?
Yeah.
And still is, no doubt.
Sure.
I read a piece where you typically read 60 to 75 books a year.
Yeah, become milling through them at the minute.
And a lot of them are based on psychology, and I'm sure there's a lot of things you've seen that you can see some people are doing the same type of approach than others, and I'm sure there's loads of learnings. But Padraig Harrington passed the comment before that the difference between a pro and an amateur is this top 6 inches. And the pros just have that mental strength to be able to kind of push on and to perform at the highest level. In your world now, like in your world as a coach, where does the psychology element come into you, and how important is it to help people kind of progress?
It's really, I mean, for me, even at the lowest level where people might not have a cognitive skill of how to play golf. So for example, if you get somebody in the early learning years where they just can't do it, actually, it's still even important. I had a young gentleman in with me last night, and probably mid-late 30s, and he was just looking at me, and he was like, he just couldn't get his head around doing it. He walked in, he literally didn't even want to pick up the club. He said, I can't do this. So already we're in psychology.
Yeah.
Why can't you do it? He's had some bad experiences before, call it trauma, but he was right. He couldn't do it at all. So the psychology of peeling him back to the early stages of it, like, can we hit it 6 meters? Can we hit it 10 meters? Can we hit it 20?
Okay.
And lo and behold, 15 minutes, 20 minutes later, we're actually doing something. It was really nice.
Yeah.
So that's psychology. And then some of the players we work with Sigmoid Sports are 2 guys, just checked in on them there. They're competing in Austria. Good players. Strong as bulls. Hit miles. One is from Luxembourg, one is from Germany. Brilliant lads. 2 decent scores today. They're off and running. If you saw them on the range beside a couple of the famous guys, you probably wouldn't notice the difference. So they've their own challenges now in terms of scoring, because they need to score better in order to graduate to the main DP World Tour, etc. So I think it's at every level.
Yeah.
And I think the psychology, what makes it really interesting in perspective of any people we get for lessons at Charlemont or at HQ is, you know, everyone presents with their own psychology. And that it's my job to try and figure out pretty quickly how we can get them, how can we be a coach, get them from A to B in terms, but first of all, you need to nearly figure out what they're thinking first, because that can be a disabler and it can be an enabler.
Yeah.
How are you looking at this? What are you trying to do? And then, like, for example, my gent last night, he didn't even want to start. He felt he was that bad. So that's a really interesting one to start with.
So I always said that I would have loved to have played golf when I was a kid.
Yeah.
My mum always encouraged me to do it.
Sure.
Right. Always encouraged me to do it. But my default was it's for our lads.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah, like me. Yeah.
That was now what I am now, right? But it was always I'll do it in time. I'll do it in time. I'll do it in time. Now I look at lads who did play when they were younger. They stepped away for 10 or 15 years or whatever, and they've come back, and it's so natural to them.
You can see it, Stephen, with the boys that come in.
Yeah.
And in the city, like, it's really interesting. We're getting this really diverse group, which is brilliant.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that in a sec. But
it is, yeah, it's true.
Is it like I have a son now? He's 8 months old. Don't worry, he won't be in Sigmoid yet
next month. Yeah.
But is it true that, like, the sooner how early would you get your kid into golf if you were encouraging them to go down that route?
It's really interesting, and we speak about our children. We love speaking about our children, but my own lassie's a great version of it, because she was around golf all the time with me, and she'd have this small club and she'd swing and she'd hit and she'd swing and she'd hit, and she never showed any grow for it at all, really, you know, in terms of kind of, you know, was never setting up to be an elite player. She's an excellent tennis player, very good dancer, national champion, ballroom, Latin, all of that stuff. Nothing to do with golf.
Oh, wow.
And then all of a sudden something happened last summer. And then all of a sudden now she's playing golf, and now she's just like, everything else is gone by the wayside. So she's in the kind of Isfan Bali kind of sampling, specializing, investing, and now she's investing in one sport at 16 years old after years of not paying it much heed.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is, when you, from a motor skill perspective, when you develop a pattern early to be able to do something, you have maybe what they call tacit knowledge of it, so you know how to do it. Mm-hmm. So therefore, you know, how much petrol you put on that flame doesn't really matter that much until you do put the petrol on the flame, and you'll see where you are. So the answer to the question is, you know, when you develop that kind of conscious learning sub-skill at an early age, in anything we do, we generally use it enough so we don't lose it. Mm-hmm. So that's why you see these guys coming back in and putting their hands on the club.
They're phenomenal. Like, some of the guys that I've played with,
they're great. Yeah,
they're just, it's just come so natural.
But you see, they've learned. It's a learned skill. They've learned it. They have control over it. Their neural pathways have been developed to a point that they know how to do this. The same way, let's say, for example, somebody goes to Australia for 6 months, has a great time, comes back, jumps in the car in Dublin Airport, drives down to Cork, and never realised that they ever thought about driving. It can, and that's the thing, when we do a lot of the coaching, one of the things we try to get buy-in from the guys and the girls is, look, it gives us a bit of time, take a bit of time with this. It's a learned skill, but you're going to have to start, and we'll have to build it from the bottom, but you can learn this and you will learn this. The problem is, it's not a very good sport to get a quick blast of energy to say you're doing it right, because it's quite difficult, because the club head is very small and the ball is very small and there's about a million things moving, so it takes a little time. But if you invest, you can do it, and it's a brilliant one. You can start it late, I think, is what we're talking about, but it just takes a bit longer. Yeah,
it's taken me a while now, to be fair. So there's a couple of things I'd love to talk to you about obviously your book. But before we do that, let's talk about Sigmoid.
Yeah, sure.
Right? Let's talk about Sigmoid Sports.
Yeah.
And as a co-founder of Sigmoid Sports, I'd love you to talk about the journey, right? Because where you are now, for those who have been following What Makes You Tick, my first live session was in Sigmoid Sports out in Sandyford, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that struck me when I met you was, I walked in, I think Jordan introduced us,
that's right.
And we had a coffee, right? And the two of us sat down and we were kind of shooting the breeze about how can we help each other? What can we do for each other? Where can we kind of collaborate? And your whole thing was like, listen, consider this space yours. So if there's something that works for both of us and you feel like you can make it happen, let's do it.
Yeah, sure.
And then we spoke about the live thing and we said, right, let's do it and let's make it happen. And we did, and that was a big piece of organization to go into it. It was a trial, but the reaction was quite positive. That's where you were last year. Now you've obviously evolved it even more. But could you just tell us about Sigmoid Sports, where it came from?
Yeah.
What was the inception, the ideation of it all at the beginning, and where has it come to today?
Well, it was one of those kind of relationships. Rob Brown was a student of mine. Rob was a fabulous golfer. He'd be quite modest about it, but he's a student of mine when he was younger. And we always got on very well, and he was a great golfer. But you could see with Rob that a bit like, I think, when go back to what Padraig said, I think one of the things I've seen as well from the shoulders up is that a lot of the great players that I've dealt with or seen, it's like it's out of the bed every morning, the 2 feet are on the floor, and it's about me and it's about hitting balls and how I can get better. So there's that real kind of line in terms of interest and desire that I find that's one of the big things I found. But Rob hadn't got that for golf, but he had it for golf as a sport and maybe somewhere that he wanted to make a bigger impression in terms of business, sport, participation, all that kind of stuff. So we started talking about players and helping athletes and how, what could we do differently and how could we kind of maybe pull together a pool of athletes. We've 5 athletes now, and how could we help them, support them in what they're doing. And on the back burner was a clothing line, and on the back burner was a centre where these athletes could come and they could avail of expertise like Dr. Paul Gaffney or Josh Percival, our nutritionist, and they could just come in, and Michael Cavan, our club fitter, myself, and sit in for a few days and go through a suite of battery of tests to say, look, where am I at? What do I need to do? And that was the vision behind why we tried to set up Sandyford. So we were waiting for a while, but then Sandyford, the piece came up a bit earlier than we thought, so we had to act quickly. And as well as that, in terms of in Dublin, first to market, in terms of trying to get into and get the concept launched, because Rob had worked in 5 Iron in New York. Okay. And like when he was there was one. I think they have 5 units now in New York itself. Okay. So we wanted it like an office for the 3 companies, and we wanted it as a place where people could feel, just like you said, that they could come in at any level. It's a performance centre, but that's to get people to perform. It's not for performers as such. So in other words, we'd have people walking in and just want to put their hands in the club and get started and see some incremental improvement in their performance. We could have somebody in who's launching a podcast who wants to get going and they want their performance. We could have somebody in, we had a young girl and her mum in, from a perspective, they're kind of starting a very tough journey in tennis, and they're able to come into our consult room and sit down with me and talk about what I've seen in golf, and is there any strategies or anything to avoid, or maybe pitfalls that I've seen along the way. So come and have a nice coffee, let Ivan, Janelle, Ellen, Rob, myself look after you, and just be in the space, enjoy the space, and then kind of figure out what it's there for you for, in terms of whether it's a question. We've had a lot of corporate evenings. We've had people come up and host meetings for very informally now, stand-up meetings almost. And that's the kind of place we wanted to create it, with the background of golf, which is where our expertise is. So you could have just as easily done it with something else. It could be like a record shop with the same thing. I mean, I even saw recently, there's one in London, which is pretty much the same type of feel, but it's like a barber's. So it's kind of one of these things that we wanted to put something beside it that we knew, but we wanted a place to meet and connect with people. And that's where one of the things in our tagline about connecting, we wanted to connect good people together. And if it didn't happen, like I wouldn't have met you, for example, things like that. So, and then the athletes, Jordan Larmer being one of them, who uses the place quite a bit to tidy up his 5 handicap. And then we have, Kira, when she's back from the States, pops in and hits balls, and we go through some stuff. And then we've the couple of guys in Europe we're working with at the moment. We've one athlete who's injured long term as well. So it's been an interesting journey on that side of things. The thing with Sigmoid Sports is possibly in the past year, I think with Charlemont and with Sandyford, on purpose, we've slowed it down a little touch in terms of we wanted to get something solid in terms of bricks and mortar, get set up, have the centres established. And then what will happen is a bit like a plate spinning exercise, to be quite honest. It'll be refocused on to see what's the next strategic move for that.
Okay, there's a lot in there, right?
Yeah.
So starting off as a kind of support, high performance support play to athletes, right?
Yeah.
Am I right in saying that the athletes that you have on board are invested in the business as well, in that when you grow the business, or you get their perspective, or you get their take, like in the clothing line, for example?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, right? Absolutely. Yeah.
Which kind of gives those athletes, so they're focused on their priority is to be the best they can be in their sport.
That's correct.
Right?
Yeah.
But after sport, like, it finishes, right? It can finish prematurely, and it
yeah.
could finish. You could have a beautiful long career, right?
Sure.
It can happen like that. Is the opportunity then for the athletes then to kind of have something after sport?
Yeah.
And that there's a kind of like that connection and care, because like you hear about agents and you hear about
Yeah.
sports agencies and all that, and a lot of it is about the bottom line, right?
Sure.
Whereas the ones who are really successful are the ones who care, and it seems like that you've picked a lovely number of athletes to be involved, so you're not spreading yourselves too thin, but you're also getting them involved in the business in itself and understanding the commercials of it and
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
opportunity. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, I think
where did that come from? Like?
I think it came from initially that thing of somebody's like so invested, so good, and then all of a sudden the career's over, and at the very least it's a really good grown-up conversation all along the way as to what's next. I know it might be 2 years away, it might be 4 years away, it might be whenever, but what is next, and what's in the pipeline, and what do you feel? And I think then you kind of do a little audit in your own head of the students and where they're at, the athletes, where they're at, and you have to sleep in your own bed at night thinking, if it all was over tomorrow, what would this person do? And that's scary when you think about it from them. And if we kind of took on the attitude that was scary for us, well, then together we'll figure something out. But I think in general terms, looking from the outside in and thinking, going through my head, if it was over for anyone at the moment now where we're at, we're not in a bad spot. We still have work to do, but we're not starting from zero, which is my big fear, is that one of the guys or girls stops playing and then all of a sudden tomorrow it's like, hey, any ideas what I should do? Because that scares me enough, never mind how much it would scare them as well. Because
so do you help the team with the athletes with that psychology part of it then?
Yeah,
as well?
I think informally,
and just kind of prepare themselves.
Yeah, there's a very clear line with that for me, Stephen, because I'm not a qualified psychologist. So I'm really clear with them is that we'll have fireside chats, experiential chats, spiritual chats about, quite honestly, even some of the mistakes I've made or I've seen made, but me personally as well. And maybe say, why don't you not do that? Because if you do that as well as me doing that, that's silly.
Yeah.
And then we'll have a chat from there, and then we'll chat with the parents as well. We're quite involved with the parents of all the athletes as well, which is really interesting.
Well, that was something I wanted to talk on, because you have this kind of triad of parents, the relationship between a parent, the coach, and the athlete, and how it's all interconnected. Like, could you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's where the book, the inspiration for the book came really when I was going through the ladies. It was so important. You hear an awful lot of thing about, some of the parents.
Golfing Buddha.
Yeah, the golfing Buddha. Some of the parents, I think, been kind of overinvested. Other parents been underinvested. And you'd have different levels of investment. So in other words, I would never say there's a way to parent. You're just kicking off on that. I'm a bit into it, and we're just doing our best. But in terms of where we're at, in terms of some of the things, I think I tried to make the point in the book that some of the things that you think might be very helpful right now could be actually hurtful later. So it's a question of almost being able to feel, provide a kind of in many ways, it's like bumper cars, or it's like a bowling lane, put up the side, let them make a few mistakes, let them go off piste, on piste a little bit. But in general, they have to try and figure it out. You can figure it out for them, but you can actually, so you can keep an eye on them and just keep a certain amount of, I suppose, in terms, let them broadly go left, go right without going off track completely, because ultimately it'll be down to the athlete to figure out how it works. And for me, that's been never ending with all the athletes. We've never got to a point yet with any of our athletes that they've figured it out.
Yeah, so just to touch on that, so am I right in saying with the book that it was scribes of what you had experienced throughout your career that you brought into kind of like making sense of it for somebody to read, right?
Yeah.
But you talk about making those mistakes, right?
Sure.
Did you make so? There's a philosopher that kind of come to mind. Waters is his name, I think it is, and he is always like, the choices that we make are whatever choice we make, it'll work out. Like if you consider a choice being a cloud, you never see a misshapen cloud or a wave. A wave is the way it is. Like there's no wrong way of doing it, right? Yeah. So because where you get to at the end of the day is where you're meant to be, type of thing, right? So when it came to your point about making mistakes and learning from them, right? Did you, looking back at your scribes and at your notes and at your points, did you look and go, I wish I didn't make that mistake? Or did you look at it and go, okay, that mistake taught me this?
Well, you have to. There's a great pal of mine, Brian, and he says change a bit of it, change all of it. That's his tagline when we meet for a pint and talk about mistakes. That's his line, and I keep going back to it.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing was when you look, and I suppose looking through the book, it's there's one good story. I think it's from the movie Charlie Winston's War. They went to the wise old man and they said, look at that kid, he got a horse. None of us kids have a horse. That kid got a horse. Isn't it great for him? And the wise old man said, we'll see. So then the kid falls off the horse, breaks his leg. Everyone comes back and says to the wise old man, it's so sad that he broke his leg. And then the wise old man says, we'll see. And then, of course, war is declared and everybody has to go off to war except the kid who can't go because his leg is broken. So I think when you're dealing with golf in particular, where the winning rate in golf is so small, like you can be busting your buns for a year and then you can win and like somebody says, God, you had a great week last week, you won 70,000 euros. Well, I'd probably divide that by 52 weeks of the year because you were grafting every week but you didn't get anything out of it. So it's kind of one of those sports that you don't get much out of it. So unless you are able to take this attitude that failure is part of the process of how you get to a point where one of these fine days you hardly even remember this out of body experience where you don't make any mistakes, but that all came as a consequence of the stuff that you're trying to do on a consistent basis. And I think with the book, with the parents, my message to the parents was I'm not telling you what to do, but I am asking you to try and see it a little bit more like that, because a lot of stuff in golf, Stephen, to be quite strong and dogmatic about it, from my opinion, actually does come back that people do not understand the sport. You have to understand our sport. It's a game of mistakes. It's a game of mistakes. And the fewest mistakes wins the watch. Like look at Rory last Sunday night. He made some horrendous mistakes, but he made the fewest. Yeah. And then he did brilliant things as well. So that's what makes it probably the greatest sport there is, because it's that kind of knife edge of brilliance versus mistake. And then you go through it. And my own lassie's playing good golf now. And when we sit in after a round of golf, it's amazing to talk to her and listen to her talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly, as Clint would have said, because our game is going to be like that. Whereas maybe you might have an opinion on this, but your sport could have been a bit more classic team performance, 30 points to 8, didn't really do anything brilliant, but didn't really do anything wrong, just got the job done. That does not happen in golf. No.
So in our ethos, if one goes wrong, we all go wrong to get him back on the right track, right? Because we can all help each other, right? If a guy picks and goes the wrong way when we had the flow going on the outside, it was like, right, okay, go that way, reset, get the ball, and then go again, right? You have another opportunity. Whereas with golf, you don't, right? You make that hit, and that could be the winning or losing of the game. I was a friend of mine. He plays off 9 or 10 in Powers Court there, and Barry's his name. And he was going around with his pro, and they were asking. Or he was like, they were playing around anyway. And Barry, a couple of years ago anyway, he was, every time he made a bad shot, he would F and moan, and he would shout, and he'd berate the ball, and he'd do all that. So after about 5 or 6 holes anyway, the pro turns to Barry and he says, Barry, you're not good enough to care about your bad shots. And he said his whole psychology of it changed, because he's like, okay, that's part of my game. So it's going to be part of my game, so let's enjoy it. And like we see Rory, we see all these superstars, Shane and everybody, and they make some howlers.
Sure.
But they have the ability to come back from them. Whereas we make howlers and then we do it again and again and again, because we're not good enough.
Well, and that's it. And I think that if you go back into it and you look at it, like you look at one of the things in my research for the book, or my interest in Buddhism over the years, but one of the things that I've got very good at very few things in my life, but generally I've got pretty good at day-to-day stuff. So in terms of like that's it. It's all we have. That's just absolutely it. In terms of like,
could you talk to that a little bit?
What does today look like? We're putting the feet on the floor. If I'm not feeling at my best, that's fine. If I feel great, that's okay. If this is busy, if that's quiet, whatever it is, it is. And I've kind of almost kept this mental scoreboard when I get into bed that night of, that was a good one today. I won 9-4. Well, not great today, it was tight, but I lost 8-7. So I've never had a scoreboard where it's been 3-0 or 0-3.
Okay.
So it's a question of like part of and that's what I loved about the book, and that's what I love about the sport, is that it's this constant ebb and flow of minuses and negatives. And then if you go back into it and you look at that a little bit deeper, well, then you talk about it led me to kind of lose positive and negative thinking and just try to go into neutral thinking. But then as a person, then I have the ability to literally sit outside myself and watch myself think negatively and watch myself think positively and realize how futile both are. And then you come back to presence. And when you're back in presence, it's the only place that ever is. So it's this constant cycle of actually being in the space that you're in. And that doesn't mean you can do some nice planning for the presence, or you can sit down and reminisce with pals and have a pint and talk about a match a while ago. But it's this kind of access to this piece that's only now. And as golfers, if we can take that, I mean, that's the secret sauce. So when Rory, like when he hit the wedge into the 18th, you know, which was every bit as bad a shot as the one on the 13th, because at least the one on the 13th, the water really showed him up. But the one on 18th for a player of his level probably wasn't what he was expecting. But from Seth and Harry to be able to jump back in the buggy, and Harry said we'd have taken a playoff, and be able to say, right, his day was kind of, at that point, his day was, he was losing 24-23 in his scorecard for how his day was going. But he managed to win the day 27-24. Mm-hmm. You know, so it's that kind of piece. And that's what I loved about doing the book. And I loved about the Buddhist philosophy, about our own actions and our own beliefs and our own energy that we bring to it. And also this kind of underpin when you go back and you look at some of the old Japanese Buddhism as well, of that you don't want to accept and you don't want to welcome bad things. But you do have to understand that they're going to be there. And once you get to that level of understanding with them, you might find a little bit more peace in general. And then the balance, the trick is trying to keep the balance if you can.
That's fascinating. The art, like Buddhism in itself is to be calm, right, and to be neutral, as you say, right, and how you connected that with golf. You probably see all types of characters coming through the door in Sigmoid, both in Sandyford and in Charlemont, right?
Yeah.
All people from all walks of life, right? Where you could be businessmen, you could be mums, daughters, whatever it is. Like you could be students, you're challenging with family life. Like there's so many things that goes on behind the person, like behind what you see in the facade that you get, right? So many things that worry them, so many things that can concern them. But I presume when they step into Sigmoid in either the locations, that there's a chance for them just to be kind of free of all that. Like there's a safety net there, is there?
Yeah, we talk about it a bit, especially with the young guns, with Ivan and Rob and the lads, you know, because these boys are fabulous. You know, they're just like, they're incredible in terms of, but like I'm double the years on the planet and I've been battered around a bit more. And my interest in this space is probably because I've been battered more, as opposed to that I'm an expert on it or I know more about it or everything's perfect with me. I think some of the fuel that drives me is that difficulty I'd have in this space myself, which has forced me in my own view to try and learn more about it, to be able to manage it. And I don't mind being open about that, because that's a lived case. So in terms of, from two perspectives, I mean, I think that anyone that comes into anyone's establishment, if we talk about a welcome, you know, it's such a, you know, you've seen it, I've seen it, but we walk into a bar, we walk into a coffee shop, we walk in somewhere, like it's the loveliest thing, isn't it?
Oh, you go back for more.
It's just fabulous. Yeah. I mean, I love it. And I think Rob, myself, and Janelle is doing a wonderful job out in Sandyford. Ellen has just joined us. But the master is Ivan, the master of the welcome. You know, we kind of have this internal thing with Ivan. Like when people love Ivan, because he just says, how's your day going? And he means it. So we want to do that, but we want to do it from a place of, and we want to get people to sit down and have a coffee, and we don't want to push them into golf, but we want to make it very clear that, do you want to hit a few shots? Do you want to try? Do you want to have a go? Because going back to one of the, I suppose, ground zero in terms of the mission that we're on is to say, look, I grew up in Claremorris. I think Dad paid, I can't remember the fees, but for all of us to play golf, when you net it down to how much it was, we could afford to do it. I mean, Ireland, after Scotland and New Zealand, we've the most golf courses per population in the world. So basically per person, you know, I'm trying to explain this to some of my clients overseas, that you drive through Charleville on the way down to Cork and there's a golf course there, and then you drive through Newcastle West and there's a golf course there. And you know, how can all these towns have golf courses when Istanbul, for example, has 1.5? So you're kind of, they don't get it at all, and we're so lucky to do that. So I think when we talked about it then, we said, why could not we have city golf, where people who haven't got access to getting out into the countryside and play, that if they could at least learn it, because the problem with our sport is you can't just go and play. So it's not like, you know, can't go for a run.
No.
It's different because there's a couple of bits and pieces that you need to have crossed your T's and dotted your I's. You need to be able to stand over the ball, put your hands on the club and move it somewhere forward. So if we can do that for people, and then all of a sudden, there's a couple of courses that are coming up in conversation in Charlemont with some of the city girls and guys, But now all of a sudden they can include themselves on that Sunday where they get the dart and they pop out to Hoth and they play a few holes with their pals. And the loveliest thing about it is, you know what? Don't even bring a bag. Don't even get the clothes. Just take a club out of your pal's bag and hit one or two.
Yeah.
And get into it slowly and just make it something available for you. What a gift this game is if we learn how to play it. Because guess what? I think our oldest student, I think, God rest him, Rob's granddad was in hitting a few putts with us in his 90s. So it's there forever.
I play a bit with my father-in-law, and he's on Foxrock, and there's a lad called Eddie French, and Eddie is well into his 90s, and he plays week in, week out, maybe 3 or 4 times. One of the things I love about golf is now to get the invite, to be invited to go and play, because it's 4 hours with people who you're just shooting the breeze, and you're obviously in competition or even just having a bit of fun, but it's just a really good social element of it.
It is,
and I find like I'm useless, right? And I definitely need to take you up on those on the train, but like I'm useless, but you get one shot and you go, that's great.
That's it,
I'm hooked.
Yeah.
And then you might have 100 poor shots, but you get 1 or 2 that are just lovely, and
that's it. And as long as you don't, as long as you're not overly concerned about it.
Tell me about the setup in Charlemagne now. So you're after opening. We're a month open, right?
Yeah, good start.
Talk to us. Yeah.
So far, so good. Really interesting people. Coffee's going great. People love the coffee, and that's a great place to connect in the mornings and come in and have their daily coffee
and that's what I love about it. You can just walk in, have a coffee, have a look at the place, and then go.
Yeah, absolutely.
It can become a place to frequent. Oh yeah. And then, as you get confident or whatever, you can start playing.
Try a few shots, see what you think. And then we've kind of got this excitement. We've got all these great guys that have kind of, and when I say guys, unfortunately, still not enough girls. Something we're working on with our Sigmoid Women's Golf Club, but it's slow. But we're trying to get girls to feel that kind of safety in the space to come in and actually work on the sport as well. That's been tricky, but our participation rate in Ireland, it's lowish compared to some of the countries in Central Europe. It's up to 15 to 17% lower. So that's a big project. We're going to try and get some help with that and get somebody to put their arms around that with us, because I actually think that capacity-wise, but capability-wise, I don't think I have the capability to know what to do to be able to move that needle a little bit more from the female perspective. But the guys that come in the morning, I think we're on 8 different countries now at the moment in terms of the members.
No way.
That come in the morning. When we say membership, let's be clear with the membership. The membership is only there. We're having our first members outing on the 17th of July. Outdoor. We're going out for outdoor. We're going for barbecue, and we're bringing the members out. But the members is not there's no fancy member space, or there's nothing to do with, you can sit there, you cannot sit there. That will never happen. Yeah. For me, that's just not going to happen. Yeah. The membership is only in place so people can experience value for money, because they want to commit to, like, being a gym member, for example. So that's all the reason that's happening for. And another really nice one is it's happening for bag storage, because you can imagine a fellow walking around Dublin City with an old set of Titleist on his shoulder as well. So we want to keep the bag for them if they want to do that as well. So that's been great. We've met some brilliant characters, and like, it's kind of who's in the door next. And the internal chat with us is like, did you meet with the great guy? You good fun, that fella. This kind of thing. So we're meeting all these new people who are not traditionally associated with golf, and that's why we set it up. And then Sandy, for slightly different vibe, we've guys out there that are driving the car into the car park, bringing their clubs up, and they're working hard on their games because they want to get better. Mm-hmm. So the overall view is, from a business model perspective, Stephen, it was never sustainable enough that it was going to be one person. It was going to be a mix and gather 'em. A lesson from me, a custom fitting from Mike, a nice coffee from Ivan, 2 people in for a joint lesson, a mum bringing in her daughter for a new drive with Michael, so on and so forth. It was going to have to be a little bit of everything for it to be sustainable, successful, and keep people. We started off with the 2 of us, and now the 6 of us. So we wanted to be able to get to a point where we're able to afford to keep people in jobs that they enjoy doing as well. And the nice thing from a workspace, I think, and I'm experiencing it, is it's not me and the staff, or it's not Rob and the staff, it's us. And we're all sitting around talking about these things when we go for a drink. And one of the things is, we wanted to make it a place where, hand up, that weekend for me, my family's doing something. Can I go Friday and come back on Tuesday afternoon? Of course you can. So it has to work for you. Now, guys, she's away, he's away. So now you can't be away because we have to cover. Oh, that's fine. Plenty of notice. That's grand. So we wanted a place that was kind of fluid for everybody in terms of that. I suppose, speaking to some of Aaron Dignan's work, maybe Brave New Work, in terms of like, what's the new workspace looking like? What does it look like to us? Well, I'm doing a few lessons on a Sunday morning. Well, Sunday's a day off. Not really. I'm going to go and do a few lessons and have a coffee. Perfect, because I enjoy teaching.
Yeah.
I'll see everybody. Alex can come up and hit a few balls.
Yeah.
And then we'll go home and have a nice dinner. Everyone's winning. So wanted to change the psyche in terms of how we're operating as well, which I think is really important. And I think sometimes, you know, when people are growing businesses and looking at businesses, you know, they're looking at it's customer based. I think it also needs to be staff based as well for how's this going to work for you, and where's the sustainability? What could make you be with us for a long time, because be together for a long time, because it's actually working for me. You know, if somebody said, God, I want to go to Australia for a month. I'm not saying we could do it, but by gosh, we try and make it happen.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I love that, because you, like, a lot of the time it's Monday to Friday and then you close up and people try to go away and switch off from work. Whereas if it becomes ingrained in it because you love it and you enjoy it, then it doesn't become work. It's part of your DNA, right?
Yeah.
Talk to me about the dichotomy of people coming through, right? Especially in Charlemont, because AIG tried a campaign last year about going into the inner city of Dublin and trying to educate and bring people who, as you say, might necessarily typically go out and play golf, but to come in and actually get lessons and to try and learn the game, right? You also spoke about it being a challenge to get women to play, right? And given your experience in the background as high performance of the ladies game, there's a difference between how you coach a girl versus how you coach a guy, right? And I know that from working with Sport Ireland. Let's just talk to that, because why do you think there's such a gap between those who play regularly and their background or that view of it versus those who don't? Like, what's the barrier from stopping people coming into the game?
Yeah, I think this from the inner city perspective, speak to that first. There's probably, first of all, there's some cost, so that always needs to be measured with. I think most of it is history. You know, as you said about the old fellas, or, you know, you can't walk there, you can't stand there, you can't wear that, you can't do this. We're getting rid of it slightly, but not
quick enough.
Not quick enough. I think that's the other side of it as well. I think one of the things that they looked at when they talked about it a little bit in one of the recent reports was the difficulty of it also. Like, genuinely speaking, it isn't the easiest thing to do. It does require a little investment early doors. And once you get that investment, it will pay off. But unfortunately, it's one of those games that for a while it doesn't pay off at all. It's a bit like, I always liken it to the clutch accelerator thing when I was trying to learn how to drive. My wife would still say I'm still trying to learn how to drive.
Lucky they're automatic now, aren't they?
So it's kind of like the difficulty as well as another piece. That's another little thing that I think is kind of probably stops people from investing in once they try it, once they say they couldn't do it. Because there has to be a bit of resolve and resilience to get to do it from that perspective as well. From the female participation perspective, I'll be brutally honest with you, I don't know what the trick is. But I do know that I'm going to put some people together with me to try and find out what it is. Yeah. And I think from my perspective, I'm not sure if it's the capability or capacity as well. There's so much going on in terms of how much we've really looked into it. We did a nice launch and we did a good job and we got some membership, but we didn't get enough traction. And I think the easiest thing for us to do is say, look, it didn't work, they're not interested. But that's us absconding any responsibility. So we need to dig in again. Yeah. We need to get a few people around us and a bit of help. And I think once you get a different energy and a different outlook, like you said earlier on in our chat, Stephen, I think it's putting your hand up and say, I can't quite crack this nut. Is there anyone out there that can help me? Yeah,
because it's having worked a little bit with Sport Ireland, right, and trying to get girls to play sport and participate. So not even worrying about golf for the moment, just increase the numbers in sport. Yeah. The psychology that came back from it was that guys and boys would be pushed and pushed and pushed and nearly shouted at. And the way coaching was then transferred into girls, and they were losing their interest because they didn't like the way the coaches were speaking to them and how they were interacting with them. And a lot of feedback when we did the research on, say, 14 to 17-year-olds was that I loved sport. I loved playing my sport, but I hated my coach. Yeah. And you're losing so many kids just to a whole world that they're losing out on. I found that when we delved into it, girls like to be spoken to, not shouted at. There seems, and this is me taking the research that we did with Sport Ireland, was that if you encourage them about why you're doing something, they would buy into it more than if you said to them, you've got to do this or you have to do it. And it was just rephrasing how you engage with them. That if they had been spoken to like that at the start, they most likely would have stayed on, right, and played the game. And her sport, I don't know if you follow her sport, they do some great work in there. But they brought in Niall Horn as a big advocate for women's sport because he's trying to encourage a lot more women to play the game of sport. There's definitely a problem out there, but there are a couple of different entities that are really trying to promote it and to raise it, and I don't know what the answer is either, but it's
the conversation alone, because we've met and talked, and I'll promise you, and I'll feed back to you on this. But because we've even brought it out and chatted about it again, it's incumbent on me now, whether I'm successful or not, to do something about it. So I'm going to try. And that means that I'm going to have to reach out to some new people. And already my head is spinning a little bit. There's a very good story. When I got the Irish ladies coaching job. I was 29, a young thing getting a national coaching job. I was surprised I got it, to be honest with you. So I was at a conference in Birmingham the following week, and we had and still have this great lady pro called Pia Nilsson from Sweden. She lives in Arizona, and she's written a couple of great books, and she's, I'd be a great fan of hers. But I remember at a conference she was speaking, she did a great speech, and she was walking down off the stage, and I said, will I ask her, will I not ask her, will I ask her? I said, I will, I'll ask her. And I walked over to her and I said, excuse me, can I speak to you? And she looked at me and she kind of gave me this blank Swedish look, and she goes, yes. And I said, I have a question for you. I said, I just got a job that I probably shouldn't have got, but I don't really know what to do. And she says, why? And I said, because it's the national coach to the Irish women's golf team. Oh, congratulations, she said. What don't you know? And I said, I don't really know. If you have any advice for me about how to, because I know your eminence, all so on and so forth. And I did everything but bow, I just said, please help me here, And she looked away and she said, okay, I have it. She said, okay. So you see, when you teach the boys, she said, and the boys are talking and you tell them, let's get started. That's fine. She said, when the girls are speaking, don't interrupt, she said. And she walked off. And for 20 years, I never interrupted the girls when they're speaking. Speaking to your point about that kind of.
So interesting.
And that's all she said to me. And she turned around, she shook my hand, turned around and walked off. And I never forgot it, because we'd go to training or we'd go for dinner at the overseas, and we had some brilliant players and some brilliant characters and some brilliant girls. But really what it was, when I look back at it now, somebody said to me, gosh, you had a great batch out of it, all the girls are on tour now, there was nobody on tour years ago. I never saw that, and I'll be honest with you, I never ever saw that. I think there's 4 or 5 girls on the tour now, and for all the years that I was doing it, we were just waiting for somebody to get into a tour event. We couldn't do it. But I don't think it was that. All I remember is the tables, the fun, them traveling together, them being friends for life. Some of them I can still see are friends for life, and it's what brought them together. And it was that kind of safety of numbers and people in sport to be able to feel that. So I think what I want to try to do with the women's golf club, Stephen, is probably to try and get somebody to help me and say, how do we create that for somebody who works in the city, who'd love to meet some people, who loves to play a sport, who loves to do this, but maybe just can't make it through the door. And I think that I think that's where my skill set has stopped now, and I need some help on this one. So that's been a really good chat anyway.
Well, let's see if we can help
Brilliant.
you. Because I remember when her name escapes me, the former ladies soccer coach.
Vera Pauw?
Vera. Yeah. So I met Vera a couple of years back.
Yeah.
And it was just before the World Cup.
Yeah.
And I was in awe of her, because she was after doing a talk.
Yeah.
And I would have run through walls for her.
Right. Okay. Well,
the way she was, but it was all, at the time there was a big campaign about belief, right?
Yeah.
Outbelief, right?
Yeah.
But when the brand was involved in building that story, they brought in all the players and they got them involved, and they asked them what they thought was the secret. And it was because we were underdogs, but we believe we're better, and they all bought into it. And it actually rallied the whole nation.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But her whole approach was allowing people to be free, and allowing them to be themselves, and not stifling them, because it's like creativity within a kid. If you tell a kid, don't jump into a puddle, and then you're like, stop,
Yeah.
They get a bit caught up. Whereas if you let them jump, let them splash and play. And
we had one guy in a corporate evening. We had one guy, which I was watching, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. He had a glove, he had a pair of golf pants. He never hit a shot.
I looked business.
He was just there, and I said, "This is exactly what we want." You know, and he was having a couple of pops, and he was relaxing. He was the belle of the ball,
Yeah.
having great crack. He had the glove on, the whole lot,
Organising everybody.
and I still never saw him hit a shot.
Love it.
Do you know?
I notice it in the gym sometimes when the girls are chatting away as well, and then the coaches don't know how to handle it, and they're like, "Stop talking."
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
the actual girls kind of tighten up a little bit.
Yeah.
Whereas if you let it off and they'll listen. They'll
Exactly.
come
Well, I
back
think
to you,
the journey on sport, back to the book as well, that like Alex's journey to golf now is she's 16 and she's very serious about it now. But it was always down to a couple of things which I think were really interesting. First of all, Michelle, shout out to Michelle and Gary, who were her coaches, because I never coached her, because that for me was crossing the line. Now, some people say I was probably eminently qualified to coach a girl in golf in this country, but formally I would have brought her to Michelle Carroll or to Gary Madden when we were in Galway with Gary, or when Michelle was around at Grange, when I worked at Grange, and I said, and that was who she called her coach. So Dad never coached her. I do now, because she asked me to. And she asked me to after we went to, I rang a client of mine. I got a guilt complex, as you'll get at some point in your life with your kids, that you're not spending enough time with them. So I said, I rang this really fabulous client of mine, and I knew she wouldn't mind. I wouldn't do it with anyone, but I was going to the Latvian Open with her son for a few days practice. And I said, look, would you mind if Alex came and played? Because the handicap limit in the Latvian Open was 16, which is very high for a national open. So I knew she'd get in.
Okay.
So off we go. 5 clubs and 2 putters. She didn't even have a full set, but she goes with Dad. She wants to go with Dad. She wants to stay in the hotel with Dad and be with Dad, and she wants to play a little bit as well. And that's only last August. And off she goes to the Latvian Open with 5 clubs and 2 putters, and comes home and says, will you coach me? Because the spark was, the fire went off, and we got her a proper set of clubs then, because she said, okay, I think I want to do it. And she was pretty good already, and it'll always be on her CV that she was 4th in the Latvian Open. She finished 4th that week.
Wow.
Now, we don't like to tell too many people there's only 7 playing in her category. But it's interesting if you have the confidence, I think, to expose them, and it goes back to Bally's research in terms of that sampling 4 or 5 sports, that specializing, maybe time studies, it comes down to 2 or 3. And then Alex is living that now at the moment, because now she's hit that investment where at 15 years old, it's getting late now. It's not that early specialization sport like gymnastics, or maybe gymnastics getting later, but swimming, something like that. But you do need to start getting yourself organized if you're 14, 15, 16.
Yeah.
So she's hit that specializing. And I promise on her life that if you told me that this would happen 2 years ago, I would have laughed at you.
Yeah.
But something happened, and it will happen if you just allowed them the space to be able to put their hand into the fire, a couple of things with a few other bits and pieces, because now the driver is most certainly not Dad. You know, we go to play at practice round. Because of my work, I have to go sometimes super early. She's in TY, and I have to go early in the morning with her. I'll tell you what, I'm second out of bed.
Yeah.
So the driver is interesting when you give them the ability to be able to say, here are the keys of the car, why don't you drive for a while? If you trust them a little bit with that, you'll see it come out, and now it's there.
Obviously, you gave them access to a couple of different sports as well. So it allowed them then to, as 100%. You say, to make that choice rather than to be just solely on one, which I think is key.
Well, she did the puck outs. She played in goal for Kilmacud Crokes for Camogie.
Yeah.
I don't know how good a goalkeeper was, but she was one of the only few in the team that could hit the ball because of her golf. So she did the puck outs, and she was the goalkeeper, and she loved it. She just ran out of time in terms of being able to do it all the time.
Yeah.
So you see, and that from socially, that was so good for her with her pals to be able to do that for a few years. So, you know, it's all these things that combine at the end of the day when you see any of them coming through in terms of, you know, their golfing skills. It's the combination. So in other words, you can be investing a little bit into another sport, but it can be feeding your golf as well, really.
So if we go back to the triad, right, of parent coaching and
child,
athlete, right, or child, right? If you take those 3 on their own, and considering your experience, what are the kind of the 2 or 3 key points that you would have for each of those areas?
Very good
to consider.
Definitely for parents, do a little investigation into sampling, specializing, investing. Do a little bit of experiential, and realize that while people say specializing is not good, it's actually very good for some kids. It really is. So just do your homework there, understand what that means, and understand what particular path that you're the leader in the house. So you're going to take your kid on some path. I chose one path. Somebody said to me, you know, if you had got Alex going at 11, she could be on the tour by now. You know, but that's not what I chose to do or Alison chose to do. So the first thing is understand your own path, and have a little bit of research behind it, be read on it, but understand this is what you want to do in terms of that. try as a parent to see failure as a little bit of a lead. If it's golf specifically, I'm not expert in many sports, but if it's golf, see failure as a little bit of a lead forward, because it can be really, really good. It can be really good. From the coach's perspective, an interesting one. A little bit of what I did maybe in an early years. Sometimes realize you're not well. It's unusual for me because I'm a coach and a parent in this conversation that we're having. But from a coach's perspective, even if it's not your child, but if it's somebody under your tutelage, realize at some point you might not be the right coach for that particular player, and have the courage to say to their parents, why don't they try this for a while? Or why don't you get some short game with this person? Or why don't you be able to do some putting with this person? And try to expose the child to a little bit more of different styles, coaching style, because then what you'll be is you'll be a mentor, and you'll be somebody that'll be in their life forever in terms of being able to be in that space. And then I think from the child's perspective, if it's golf in particular, is to really sit down and have a very frank conversation with somebody about how hurtful and painful this game is sometimes. And if you know that and you're aware of it and you sign up to it, it's easier to bite it off, because it is not hiding with 10 other girls. And not hiding behind 10 other girls and losing 1-0 and not taking any responsibility. It's all on your soul. It's all there to see. You drive home after that score in the car with your parents. It is so sore. And it's all exposed. You're completely exposed. So know what you're signing up for. And I don't know if you have to be a particular type of person for it. I think you just have to understand what it is. So parent, for me, definitely understand the sampling, specializing, investing as they grow up. That's hugely important, hugely beneficial. From the coaching perspective, know when somebody else could actually help the team a little bit. And then from the kids' perspective, to understand that if you're going to enter into this sport, just understand the rules of engagement before you do it.
Of that. So I ask everybody this question, and it's imagine that you have a message to the world, and it has to go up onto a billboard. And like in every billboard, you've got 3 seconds to take it in, right? So if you're driving your car, you see that big 48 sheet, and that's your message to everybody, and everybody's going to see it. Given your experience, what would you say that message would be?
On my brighter moments, which something like this extrinsically will motivate me, speaking to somebody like you, who I've only known recently, but really enjoy it. And I feel motivated, and I feel energized, and I feel excited. It would be back to John Kabat-Zinn, who I refer to in my book quite a bit. He's one of the great, the eminent. He was the introducer of mindfulness-based stress reduction in the US many years ago. But it would be one of the titles of his book, which is "Wherever you go, there you are." So basically, in terms of that ability to be present and that ability to be in the moment. And I say that with a kind of caveat that I would put that on the billboard, but I'd be spoofing, because I'm not that good at it myself, and I've really struggled. Maybe also a little bit of workload and a bit of stuff that you're a bit tired in general. I've struggled really with that even the last couple of years, and I kind of got good at it for a few years, and then I kind of lost my way a little bit. But even like the motivation of today's conversation is, right, Dave, get back on path now and do what you say. You do what you're asking other people to do, because just because I'm asking other people to do it, I don't want anyone to think, well, he's got it sorted, he's just there and he's just present. I'm not. That's why I struggle with it. But if I could improve as a human, and if I could go somewhere as a human, that's where I'd love everyone to go, and that's where I'd love to go. Because if you have no choice. That is the only, the divine self that sits there in front of you is the person that's there in front of you. And the history, and maybe it's because we get a bit older as well, but you create so much more experience and so much history that some of it can be scar tissue as well. And we have a choice then, and it's so difficult not to go back and look at that. And also in terms of, we're family men and we have responsibilities and looking forward, and it's so easy to be anxious and worried. Especially like when you look at what we're invested in right now from a business perspective, or whatever the case may be. Pick whatever you want, pick your poison. But wherever you go, there you are at the end of the day, and you're sitting there in the middle of it, and it's about trying to reason with that and settle with that.
One more thing, because you just touched on it there, and you kind of you breezed over it there.
Yeah.
Today, my message would be, like, what does the voice, the Dave inside, say to yourself? Like, what's your self-talk like?
Yeah, it can be really abusive a lot of the time. It can be not. I think Katie Byron calls it not enoughness. She wanted to put that word into the dictionary. It's never enough, Stephen. it's failure. It's I'm probably most worried about letting people down, and I don't know where that came from, and something I'm trying to work through. But it's like I always see a lot of the time, it's amazing when I'm doing my thing and I'm teaching, I'm probably free of all of it because I'm really in the space of that person in front of me trying to
Yeah.
hit a white ball.
Yeah.
But when sitting on the bus on the way home or something like that, it could be a little bit negative. It could be very anxious. It could be worried a lot of the time. And then there's the kind of a rally, and then there's a gym session. I started gym practice last September again, which has been really helpful.
Yeah.
Really super helpful.
Yeah.
And just it's not good a lot of the time. And then, but the difference is now from the outside looking in, I can see it. So I can actually see the 2 Davids or even the 3 Davids that exist.
Yeah.
And then it's the constant battle to try to access the one that's more useful, more beneficial to me and to others.
Yeah. Read the book, The Chimp Paradox.
Yes. Steve Peters. Yeah.
And my chimp is called Hank.
Yeah.
And honest to God, he comes at me sometimes. And like that, being a dad, now having a whole new purpose, reviewing the world and kind of keeping an eye on things that I would never have considered now. I think there's a great philosopher, Carl Rogers, who says what's personal is universal. And a lot of that comes from what you're going through. You probably, when you voice it, you'll realize there's a lot of people around you that are going through quite a lot as well.
Yeah, but you feel very alone in it, don't you? You feel kind of like, you feel like, you
don't want to burden or feel like you're burdening somebody. But the way I see it is that if you were speaking to your best friend, would you say that to them?
Yeah.
And if you wouldn't, then you're not allowed to say it yourself.
Yeah.
So, especially when it comes to self-talk.
Yeah. This thing I talked to you about this morning that we got some professional support with, it's interesting. But I had a chat with my brother yesterday and he rang out of the blue from England. He's busy, he's 2 kids. But like it felt so good after 20 minutes just chatting to him. And we don't talk because we're great pals. We're all great pals in our house. But like for some reason I was sitting outside and I was just kind of thinking about this morning's meeting a little bit and ruminating over an issue that I need to solve. And it's amazing. Stu called and it was like, when I put the phone down, I said, "Gosh, we're going to get this be okay." So it was really nice to, even whether it was a friend or a family member, but to kind of speak about the thing and like put it out there. And I think to answer your question, that'd be when I'm at my not most non-enjoyable phase of the day. So that's me lost a couple of points, and then me at my best is probably, cooking for something for the girls at home, sitting down, asking them how their day was, having the crack with them. We do a thing called Best Bits at Night, which is kind of, we still do it. She's 16, we still do it. So best bit inside, best bit outside. It was an old psych trick years ago we started doing when she was born. We've done it all the time. And it's a little bit about coding, about when you go to bed and you just remember the good bits. And it's incredible. So best bit outside was when I took Stella for a walk. Best bit inside was when we sat down and we watched F1 Drive to Survive together or whatever. So it's almost like you're kind of looking at these contrary experiences that happened in the same day, but then you realize, hold on, this is life, and it's kind of hard to balance with it, but by the same token discussing it and discussing it with other people, and kind of, you don't want to feel like, oh good, they're suffering as well, but as Dan Harris says on 10% Happy are my fellow suffering beings, everyone's kind of has that, and it's that score again, 7-4, 6-2. But recently, probably, I think in terms of the self-talk, it's kind of like there's been a few 2-0 defeats, and I think that's when you have to start saying, okay, I need to have a chat with one of my family, one of my friends here. I need to kind of put this in perspective a little bit, and I need a bit of, like you said, I need a little bit of help. Put my hand up.
Yeah.
Need to be able to say.
We all need a bit of help every now and again.
Yeah, 100%.
So Dave, take this moment to shout out to the world. Where can they find you? How could they reach out to you to get in touch if they wanted to learn more? Yeah,
well, I think Sigmoid HQ in Sandyford in the Beacon South Quarter is where we started. We're there 18 months now. Doesn't feel like that. I think it's about 16 months since you were there. You were there really early.
No, yeah.
So the paint was dry.
It was, yeah.
And we're in Charlemont Square, Gordon Place in Charlemont Square, which is the new development, beautiful new development there. And we have a couple of lovely collaborations with crew in there. They're doing our food for us for our corporate gigs. Lovely small space in there. 2 simulators, coffee, 3 simulators in Sandyford. And really what we're trying to do is, I think in terms of anyone that has any interest, and like genuinely, if somebody was to say something behind our backs, I'd love to hear, I was a beginner, I was a really good player, I'm in the middle and I'm going back playing, I hurt myself, but now I'm better, and it doesn't matter. I'm a 17-year-old female. I'm a 42-year-old male. I'm left-handed. I'm right-handed. The whole idea is that when you come in, that if you want to get involved in the great sport, we'll do it with you, and we'll do it slowly, and we'll do it to a point that you could just do it over a while, and maybe even it might be 2 years before you want to go on a golf course, but at least then you'll hit the ground running as such, and you'll be able to know what you want to do. And we're doing some really nice stuff for some like team building, some corporate evenings, breakfast. We did a lovely breakfast for a company there a couple of weeks ago. It was really nice. We did it at 7 o'clock, hit some balls. I did a bit of a clinic for them. We had coffee and pastries, buns by the Great Ivan, and it was lovely. And we're just trying to create this community. And then the last thing is, and call to action, Sigmoid Women's Golf Club. So we only have 12 or 13 members at the moment, but we're really looking to try and pool together a group of like-minded people that want to socialize, play golf, and learn how to play the game themselves. And we want to so if our participation rate the last time I checked it was 23-24% in this country, imagine if a small little company like ours could drive that up 1%, what everyone else could do.
Yeah.
So, been a bit vulnerable with you. I think that one of the things I've learned from today is I need to get my ass in gear and go back and actually start to put people together. I'll email you over the next few days, and I need to put 4 or 5 people into the room, sit down together and say, guys, and you know what, from a financial perspective, it's a break-even perspective. It's not the money side of things that we need to have, but we do want to create this community. And I think that sometimes what we have is we've got a bit of passion around it, but maybe we're just lacking strategy. So that's the women's golf club that happens at Sigmoid. So yeah, Sigmoid Women's, Sigmoid HQ and Charlemont Square. So anyone wants to pop in, it'll be a small group of us: Janelle, Ellen, Tisha, Rob, Ivan, or myself. It'll be one of the 6 of us. Brilliant. Spinning the coffee in there. So come and see us.
Well, I'll put all that information into the show notes.
Brilliant.
But Dave, great to have you.
Pleasure.
Thanks you very much for coming on board.
Thanks a million. Cheers.
Thank you. This episode of What Makes You Tick is brought to you by Wilson's Auctions, Ireland and the UK's largest independent auction company. I'm delighted to have them on board. They auction everything from designer goods, vehicles, machinery, luxury watches, jewellery, and land and property. This year is also very, very special to Wilson's Auctions, as they are celebrating 25 years in Dublin and about to launch their new website, which is wilsonsauctions.com. It's a whole world worth exploring.